She asked me if I would do a presentation and talk about roles. And so I put together this PowerPoint presentation and I entitled it, as you see it on the screen, Rolling Along, a Story of Cherokee Rolls, and that's R-O-L-L, not R-O-L-E. Please pass that on to your friends. Because we get so many emails and questions that are written out, and they'll say, I'm trying to get my grandma's R-O-L-E number. And nobody will tell me what it is. But unless she was the number 2 understudy for Ophelia in a production of Hamlet, then that would be the only role that she would be playing. It would not be a number. That'd be the only number that she was at. Because people don't understand that it would be a role and R-O-L-E, obviously. But R-O-L-L is actually basically a list. But there's much more to it than that when you look at what is being called a role in association with the Cherokee and Cherokee records. And when we think of roles, what do we usually think of? We think of roll call. Remember school, they still do that now, where the teacher would call out our name and we'd say we were here. And if we didn't say we were here, she knew we were absent. And then of course we got what? Cinnamon roll, butter roll, roll of film, roll of microfilm. There's all kinds of roles, but the roles that we're going to talk about today are actually records that are done on behalf of the Cherokee, primarily by the United States government, so they can keep track of statistics and how many Cherokee they were trying to deal with, basically what they were working with when they were putting these together. But the United States started the roll rolling. I'm touching today on 33 rolls, so-called. But they each had different purposes and different meanings, and what their purposes were not exactly just a list of names. There's more to it when you look at it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not changing my slide. Anyway, that was in the roll. And that's the list, 33. They're often known by other names other than just roll. But that just touches upon it to you. They only had a certain time to do this. A roll by any other name would be a list of heads of household. This is the 18th and 17th, 1835 immigration rolls. This was done by the federal government. This was in association with the Treaty of 1817 and the companion Treaty of 1819. Basically, you'll see up on the screen, you see it's been into a book version by Jack Baker back in the 70s. You got a copy of it at the library at the Research Center. Most libraries, especially in the state of Oklahoma, have a copy of this in their library collection. And I'm sure a lot of libraries across the country do as well. They have a little history section, most libraries do. You can see an original image on the screen down the lower left, and over to the right is the transcription. Jack Baker put together, and David Hampton, I think David Hampton was part of this, I think it's Jack Baker. But anyway, this basically just tells you the head of the family, it tells you how many persons are in the family, and it tells you where they immigrated from. And it gives you a date of immigration, which starts in 1818, in the earliest date. But 1817 is when the treaty was signed, was the first treaty, and then 1890 was the second treaty. But again, it doesn't give you pertinent genealogy information that I'd be interested in. It doesn't tell me their date of birth. It doesn't tell me who the 12 people in the household are. But it is something more than just a list of names. It does give you a little bit of other information. Roll. We have a list of reservees. Now this was a reservation called Reservation roll. David Hampton put this in a book form. And basically what this was also associated with the Treaty of 1817, 1819, whereby if they did not want to migrate to the new Indian Territory here in northeast Oklahoma, primarily in the northern third of West State of Oklahoma, then they can remain on their farm or get a 640 acre land reserve. And this is a list of those that shows to take reserves. Again, it doesn't give you a lot of detailed information, but it does make notes. You can see the original image on the screen. It does give you notes to the person that's named in this as a reservee. Robert Armstrong did a survey, a map of the 640 acre reserves. You see it in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And this really just gives, again, statistical information. It tells you where the reserve was located. And basically what happened was the federal government giveth, the state government basically took away. Once this was happened and these reserves were done, States passed laws whereby these reserves were being null and void by the state. Georgia had a land lottery. A lot of folks were moved out of their homes during that period in Georgia. And so this is a good source for names of who are on the reservee list. But again, it doesn't go into a lot of detail about family or genealogy information, which I would like to know, of course. And that shows you a little image of the book that David Hampton put together. David C. Hampton. When you're on a roll, it's probably a population census. Now, this is sometimes called the 1835 Henderson roll. But in reality, a man named Mr. Henderson, who was appointed by the federal government to do a portion of the census, only transcribed or enumerated a portion of the population. He did not do the entire population census. It's also now we primarily refer to as the 1835 Cherokee National Census or Cherokee Census. It was called for by the Infantry Removal Act of 1830, where the federal government made a list of heads of family and how many persons were in that family. And at this time, in this census, as we saw in the immigration roll, the population census for the immigration roll, list of removal folks that were removed as old settlers, later known as old settlers. You can see this breaks it up into age groups, like so many males over 18, so many males under 18. It also gives more statistical information, like how many bushels of wheat they had, how many outbuildings they had, how many slaves they had. And this is the first time the federal government tried to establish what is referred to as a blood degree or a blood quantum. The 1835 census, the federal government will only list full blood, half blood, and quadroon, which is quarter blood, referred to as quadroon in the census. But Mr. Henderson is going to give his name. It's also referred to as a Cherokee roll, as well as these other two names as well. It's all the same document. And again, it just tells you the head of the household, but it doesn't name the males under 18 or the females over 18. Mom, can I get a second roll? I'm Census. In Census, I'm still hungry. This is the 1848 Malay roll, named John Malay, or Malay, how do you want to say it? I think Malay. Try and say it. But basically, this is also a population census of those Cherokee that remained behind and did not remove in the removal, known as the Trail of Tears, by most folks out in the world today. Again, this was interesting is that not only did it name family, but it named the family group. It also made notes out to the far side of it, of each family individual, whether they were living or deceased by a certain time period. That information is listed in this. The images I'm showing you that are original images I got on Ancestry.com, where they digitized a lot of this information that I'm showing you today. Over to the left is a handwritten transcription. It was done by a, her name, she's deceased now, she lives in Muskogee. She put this together, she's a volunteer at the Heritage Center, and she went through this Malay, and she wrote she transcribed it by handwriting and all. We have that at the Heritage Center, the Research Center. Rolling. Meet them in Annuity list road. I'm not saying anything this long. This is all referred to as 1851 Old Settler roll. This was conducted by a man named John Brennan. He also did a roll that's called a roll that took his name called the Brennan roll, which I'll show you in a minute. Now this is the transcribed version of it. There is a handwritten version of it, which is on Ancestry.com. But this is the typed up transcription of it. Basically, this is those families that had migrated after the Treaty of 1870-1819 and that this is an immigration roll or head of households. And those that migrated previous to the main removal. Some migrated all the way through from 1817-18 all the way up, like I said, 1835, and up into right before the main removal. This down here, what was it called? A pay list. It's actually a pay list. They're being paid out. But it's also called the Old Settler Payroll. I mean, it has various names as well. This actually groups them in family unit, which they had not done previously. It was the earlier one that just has a household. Malay did put them in family groups. And that's a list of those Cherokee that says they belong here in Cherokee, North Carolina, are today. And this one, we've got those old settlers over here. They also partook in the monies from the Treaty of New Echota. That's what this is in reference to. The Treaty of New Echota had promised to pay out $5 million. And in 1836, after they ratified it, of course, the Treasury of the United States did not have $5 million in it, so they could only help finance a portion of the removal of the Trail of Tears. and the other part of it they would pay out, and not until 1851-52, and this is the old settler rule. John Brennan, if anybody's curious, his house is in Van Buren. It's a museum. I don't know what their hours or days are, but again, he was not Cherokee. These names you're going to see associated with all these roles are not going to be Cherokee names. They're going to be United States federal officials that are hired by the Bureau or that go with the censuses and payment lists. And we keep on rolling. This is another one. This is the 1851 Sire on the left, and then the 1852 Chapman on the right. Sire was appointed to do the Cherokee that were still back in the North Carolina, Northeast Georgia area of the old Cherokee Nation. This is a list of those families that would receive payments there. Sire started out doing this, but then Sire messed up, and Chapman had to finish it off. So there's the Seiler and then there's the Chapman, but they're both basically the same families in the same general areas. They're where the old Cherokee Nation was located. Again, now this actually shows you their ages. You saw in that previous old settler roll, they did not give those folks' ages and just their names, and they were grouped in family group. This actually gives a little bit more detailed information. As you can see, it's really tiny. But it will tell you the relationship with each of the family members. It also gives you their ages, and male or female. That's something that the previous ones did not do. And it was the United States even itself, in general, population censuses in 1850 and every 10 years after were done by family group, by house-to-house enumeration. Before 1850, all federal censuses were just the head of the household, and so many people in the household. They did not go into that finite detail of genealogical information like dates of birth or dates of death and so on, or maiden names of their wives. Again, these do not do that either, but they still are just sort of information if you can get back to this period when you're researching the family tree. Some Cherokee can, and then not all Cherokee can. It just depends on those other names. I know that Lacey Christie, who is not on one of on the Drennan, I don't believe. Watt is on there, but Lacey Christie isn't, although he should have been. Oh, 1835 census, I think that was it. 1835 census, Lacey Christie wasn't on that, but he should have been. So these are not, no such thing as a complete, concise, correct record and associated with genealogy, no matter what background we're researching, Cherokee or any other background. There's going to be a mistake with this information. There's going to be a misspelled name. There's going to be an age wrong. There's going to be something that's not going to be correct in it. Spelling is always the worst, because a lot of times they couldn't spell the Cherokee name phonetically. The federal government, when they were writing the names out, so they just spelled it the way that they thought it sounded. They had extra letters to the consonant vowel or the sound, the phonetic sounds, filtering, like aw, they had an H on the end of A, which was just A, would be aw, but there's no H in it. But they would add it. And as we merrily roll along, keep on going. This is the Drennan roll I just spoke about. This again puts them in family group. This is actually, like I said, the pay list as well as was the old settler 1851, the Seiler and the Chapman, and this were payment lists. They're receiving monies from the treaty, a good show that the federal government promised to pay out. This puts them in family group. It'll tell you, it'll tell you their ages. It'll tell you how much money they were to receive per family unit. It would tell you who the representative was that was giving them the funding, and then there'll be other notes over to the far right. But not all families had notes next to them. Later on, at the turn of the 20th century, with what's called the Ian Miller roll or Eastern Cherokee applications, they would use the 1852, they would use the Drennan, they would use the Chapman, and they would use that to pay out those that were applying to Ian Miller in 1906, 1909, because it was a future payout that they would do later. We'll get to that in a minute. Roll out the census carpet, companies coming. The 1854 Act of Congress roll, all the roll is actually, again, population census. And this is related to Eastern Cherokee that was in North Carolina, that area, where the Eastern Cherokee are today. This is groups of families and the payout they were going to receive that were missed in the previous. Like I said, the Seiler messed up, and he missed out a lot of people, and Chapman had to take over. So this was, they were adding extra families that had not received the monies in the previous 2 years earlier payments. Rolling around, some more population census. This is the 1867 Tompkins roll. This the 1867 PAL roll. The one on the left is the census of Cherokees, and also was the first census of Cherokee freedmen that were now citizens of the Cherokee Nation. That was taken by a guy named Tompkins here in the Cherokee Nation in 1867. They're grouped together in family groups. They also have their ages in 1867 as a male or female. Over to the right is the 1867 PAL roll. That was the census of those Cherokees still in the Eastern North Carolina, Ardea, and that general vicinity that were there after the Civil War. And that was the list of those families. What's interesting about the PAL is that you see there are notes to the right with the PAL image, population census image. But you don't see that in the Tompkins list, which sometimes it's related to the family that was being enumerated or being paid out, whether they were living or deceased, and so on and so forth. So the PAL roll gives good information.
I want to go to Walmart. I want to go to Walmart.
Rolling on by, it makes census. 1867, Cherokee Delaware roll. Now, Delaware were brought in after a compact agreement between the United States and Cherokee, and they're in Kansas, and Kansas belonged in there, so they moved them down into the Cherokee Nation, because the Cherokee Nation would accept friendly Indians, but not unfriendly Indians. And so they were incorporated in as Cherokee Nation citizens, and this is the group of those families on the left, of those in 1867, that were after the compact, or the final compact, that would be integrated into the Cherokee Nation citizenship population. The 1869 Swetland roll, which you see on the right, that was a population census done of those Eastern Cherokee in North Carolina. I'm showing both rolls for both Eastern Band and Cherokee Nation here in this presentation. And basically they're about the same, although like I said, the Eastern Band census that the federal government did, you can see they made extra notes on the far right, which a lot of censuses of the Cherokee Nation, these early censuses did not do. But they tell about the family, again, if the family member is deceased, or any other information associated with that family, which is good information. And again, I got these images off Ancestry.com. We also use Fold3.com, and I'll show you our resources here in a minute. Roll over and over. A census or an annuity. These are on Ancestry. This is the 1874 Cherokee roll. It is an annuity list. The Cherokee Nation territory originally encompassed not only the northeastern. I'm sorry, what? Oh, sorry. I'm watching, like, I was going like that every time. I'll get good flash. I've got my phone here, so I'm watching my phone at the time. I'm trying to ambidextrous, which I was. Anyway, this is 1874 Cherokee on the far left. That is named as a payout list. When the Cherokee Nation was established here, originally, after the Treaty of 1828, the later land patent that was given and was signed by Mark Van Buren, which we have the original at the Research Center in the Archives and Collections. It was a land patent where they owned their land, their territory. The principal chief asked for that, Chief Ross, asked for them to have a deed to this land that was here in the Cherokee Nation. And originally covered, if you're not familiar, you know it covered all the way to the northern third of what state of Oklahoma, out to the Panhandle, and it also covered a little rectangular area in southeast Kansas. And there was the surveyor's error known as the Cherokee Strip along the southern border of the state of Kansas. After the Civil War, tribes brought in out of Kansas, Osage, the Tahlequah, the Kaw, the Saginaw, were moved into that midsection of the Cherokee Nation. That's what happened after the Civil War. The Cherokee Nation, I'd say, neutral in the Civil War. John Ross tried to, but then they were surrounded by the South, so they joined the South temporarily in hopes that they would not seek repercussions. John Ross was in D.C. talking to Lincoln, saying, we didn't mean to go with the South, we meant to stay with those who deserted us, we needed protection, we didn't know what to do. And so he agreed that they were not doing it. Then he got assassinated, and they all went out the window, and President Johnson was not going to follow Abraham Lincoln policies. And so that was wrong. So those Cherokee were brought in out of Kansas. I'm not sure, I would say those tribes were brought in out of Kansas. Also, you'll know in the very extreme northeast corner of the state of Oklahoma, there are the smaller tribes, the Wyandotte, the Seneca Cayuga, the Ottawa, and the Quapaw. They were moved into that area of the Cherokee Nation as well. Until all that was left now after the Civil War was the outlet, Cherokee Outlet, which is next to the Panhandle, and then what we know today, the northeastern area of Oklahoma. Now you know that when the Cherokee got here, they settled in the most populous area of the Cherokee Nation, which was, they settled in the most mountainous or hilliest area of the Cherokee Nation, the population did, which was in the later referred as the 5-county area at one time. Here in the Cherokee Nation, which is Cherokee County, was one of those 5. The majority of the Cherokee population were settled because of the hills and the valleys, and it was more like home. So not everybody lived, nobody lived out in the outlet, and hardly anybody really lived up towards Bartlesville and Nowata and up that way. The cattlemen up in Chelsea and around there use it for grazing their cattle. But very few Cherokee actually lived there early on. But all that was left was the outlet and was David 14 County reservational boundary. But that outlet was Texas cattlemen were bringing their cattle up north. They were going to Wichita to sell them. They were using that outlet for grazing. The Cherokee Nation learned about it. The Cherokee Nation officials met with this cattle association, and they agreed to sign a lease to the Cherokee Nation where they would pay so much money a year for them to lease that land for them to feed their cattle on as they took it from the market. The federal government found out, and they were going to take it away, and they took it away, basically. But this is a list of when they would get money from the outlet sales, they would pay it out to the Cherokee population. And this 1874 list that I found on Ancestry is a list of those families that received the payout as early as 1874. This is the earliest payout I've seen in association with the outlet. In the middle, you see here is the 1880s authenticated roll. There we go. Say it, authenticated 3 times fast, I think. But it's also the 1880 Cherokee Nation Census. It is also, there's also an 1880 pay list, which I'll see right here. It's called the live receipt roll. That was done in 1880. It's almost just like a population census. Same type of information is involved in this, as well as how much money they would be paid out. Again, these images are on Ancestry.com under Oklahoma collections that we're looking at here. And if you go to Oklahoma collections and you go to rolls, the category for rolls on Ancestry.com, there'll be a list of not just Cherokee, but all the other tribes as well that they have available that are digitized, as well as like the Millet and the Powell and those rolls that were done for the Eastern Band group that are there today. William Hester, he was in charge of doing this census by the federal government. He was not Cherokee, but this is a census of the Cherokee that were in the Eastern Band of the Cherokee area, North Carolina, Southwest North Carolina primarily. This is the census of them in 1883. This would be the base roll that would be used by the Baker Commission in the mid-1920s. And the 1880 would be used as a base roll for the Cherokee Nation here by the Dawes Commission. As we saw previously in that previous slide, in the middle. And the Dawes Commission would make notes in it, whether the person by 1900 at the time of Dawes was dead or living, and what their census card number was would be written out next to those persons in that middle image. And then 1883, again, it was used as a base by the Baker Commission. They also would use the 1896 Cherokee Nation Census, the Dawes Commission would, and then the Baker Commission would use the 1908 Fred Churchill roll as their basis for those that were applying to the Baker Commission in the mid-1920s. Again, like the Eastern Band censuses, there's more detailed information related to each of these families that were living there in that area of southwest North Carolina, and that have like more family-related information, which I like. Like I said, we go back to that the Cherokee Nation 1880 census. It tells you family groups, it gives you their ages, and then so like how much corn they had, week they had. But it doesn't tell you like if they were dead or something, when they died or what, where they were, that kind of thing. And this is called the Hester again. And then the next, what's it? Like water rolling off, an annuity or a census. This is the 1883 Cherokee roll, as it's referred to on Ancestry.com, and this is the 1883 supplemental roll of orphans. These were orphans that were left off the 1880 census. They were in the various orphanages within the Cherokee Nation at the time. And then this is the 1886 Cherokee roll. The two on either end, the 1883 and the 1886 Cherokee rolls, were pay lists. They were done by population censuses. These again are on Ancestry.com. They're digitized, and what we primarily use, as I mentioned before, the web. But they do give information as to each family member, their ages, and then how much money they would receive. And there were also notes made in these that had not been made in previous censuses of the Cherokee Nation. Now, one thing that we were looking at earlier with the Hester and Drennan and Chapman, these censuses were actually done by the Cherokee Nation. And if I'll go back here, the Cherokee Nation also did these. program did not do these Cherokee Nation did. I forgot to mention that. Roll it back, but is it a census or an annuity? So that's and I'm repeating this throughout this whole presentation is because for the most part, what we've been looking at are basically like the population census where they were a payout list for like the monies from the 1835 treaty that showed over the program that promised to pay $5 million. And they weren't meant for genealogy, but we can use them for genealogy. You know, it gives some information that would be good to know about our family member if they're listed on these records, but they should be. If they're not, they got missed. That's another thing too. I mean, there's no such thing as a complete, concise record associated with any one making records. This is the 1890 Cherokee payout list, and this is the 1890 Wallace roll. Now, the Wallace was associated with Cherokee Freeman that were sisters to the Cherokee Nation, and this is a list of family members of the Freeman families on the right, and then 1890 is Cherokee receipt roll, and their names are listed on that as well, and they received. But basically, they're either one or the other. You're looking at these records. So instead of calling it the 1890 Cherokee receipt list, which they should have, you know, instead of roll. So if people contact us, they're always trying to get the roll number. If you have to explain to them today, you don't get a roll number. They don't understand that. I try to explain that to them. That's part of my job. And try to get them to understand what it means, you know, an aspect of it. So if they find somebody on the Drennan roll, like, hey, I found my grandpa John Smith on the Drennan roll. What do I do now? Well, if that's your John Smith, that's cool, but unfortunately, that's what all you're going to be able to do. You're just going to find out that's John Smith. You know, you're not going to be able to use it for anything else. The Cherokee Nation doesn't recognize any of those other roles, other than the Dawes. They don't recognize any of those other roles for purposes to be used for access and become a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Still on a roll. This is the 1890 Cherokee Nation census. The Cherokee Nation took this population census. There also was a payout list in 1890. I can't have it on the next image. This is the 1893 Cherokee payout list, which is called Cherokee roll. These again are on ancestry. Again, it gives you that same type of statistical information we've been looking at in these previous slides, as you can see up on the screen. Well, over the time, but if you have to see the actual image, you'll see what I'm talking about. If anybody here have access to ancestry.com, or if they don't, do familysearch.org. Family Search is a free site. I'm going to do that as a source here in one of the slides towards the end. We have those. 20 minutes. All right. And the beat rolls on. 1894 Star roll, but not Ringo. It was named after Ezekiel Starr, who was the treasurer of the Cherokee Nation at the time that made this payout list. This was the payout associated with the sale of the Cherokee outlet in 1894 to the federal government. Federal government, Benjamin Harrison, passed a proclamation and said, we'll either take it by eminent domain or we'll buy it off of you. The Cherokee Nation really had reluctantly said, well, you can buy it off of us. Of course, they didn't pay what it was worth an acre, which is what they would later get paid out at the turn of the 20th century with the wholesaler payroll of 1896 and the 1909 the Miller or Eastern Cherokee application. But this is with Ezekiel Starr. I might mention that the Life census, if you saw it in the previous slide, he was Mr. Life. He was Daniel. He was the treasurer of the Cherokee Nation at that time. And he was doing those pay lists. So again, this is a Cherokee Nation mandated record. They call the roll out. They call the roll out. Say what it is not. Say what it is not. What it isn't. Say what it is, not what it isn't. Say what it is, not what it isn't. Say it's a pay list, or say it's an annuity list, or say it's a census. Don't call it a roll. I think the only thing we call a roll, I mean, even the Dawes roll, I mean, I can say that, it shouldn't be called Indian. Dawes should, use Dawes, but roll is associated with every one of these records we've been looking at, the word roll. And it gets people confused on the outside that don't know what the roles are, or what they're about, or what their purposes were, or what is used today for citizenship in the Cherokee Nation. But again, these images I can get off ancestry.com. This is the 1896 Old Settler Pay List. Now this is a similar, not quite the same as what's going to be called the Ian Miller or Eastern Cherokee applications. This payout to the Old Settler in 1896. It tells you who the original payee was in 1851, the 1851 Old Settler Annuity list in 1851, and their descendant or heir at the time of this 1896 payment. So what it does tell you is the name of the original payee and then it will tell you how the persons that are heirs to that person, how they're related: granddaughter, grandson, daughter, son, niece, nephew, cousin. Again, it gives you their ages in 1896. I've looked to try to look to see if there's any applications for 1896 Old Settler pay list, but I've never found any where they've like given detailed information, like their dates of birth or anything. Like Miller asked that in the Eastern Cherokee applications, which I'll show in a minute. But this is the 1896 Cherokee Nation Census on the right. This was used as a backup to the 1880 census for those Cherokee citizens that were born after 1880. When we were living in 1896, that was the backup. Now, originally the Dawes Act of 1887, they called it, they would use the old 1835 census the federal government took, where they had a household. It was 61 years old. And what happened with that, just as anything else that goes on associated with Cherokee Nation, outsiders found out about what was going on, and a bunch of people from other states, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, they all began to get attorneys and they began to apply in 1896, but the federal government wasn't getting what they wanted because Cherokee Nation was fighting the Dawes process. And so Cherokees themselves were not coming forward in 1896, so they had to do something. And so they passed the Curtis Act in 1898, and they changed the criteria from the 1835 federal government census to the Cherokee Nation's own 1880, as I showed you, population census, and this 1896 census that was done after that. Now, if you go to the 1880 census, it tells, they'll say like NCHUR, which is Native Cherokee, or they'll say AW, or AWH, which is adopted white. You'll see those abbreviations listed as to them next to each other on the 1880 census. And the other thing associated with Cherokee Nation, other than this 1896 census, they believe that in preparation for what the Dawes Commission was trying to do, they thought they should be a step ahead just in case they didn't win the case to get the Dawes file roll obliterated, and they remain the way they've always been time since they've been here. So they promised them never to make a state or territory of the Cherokee. And so this was used as backup, but the Cherokee Nation made an attempt at this time to establish blood degrees. The lowest blood degree, I think, on here, and someone may correct me, is like maybe a 16. And that isn't that low. When the Cherokee Nation was doing this census and trying to establish a blood degree. Because Cherokee identity was not originally based on blood degree, it was based on birthright and matrilineal birthright. And that's how you identify as Cherokee originally, and then it later on changed as they began to marry and intermarry with Europeans and so on and so forth. But this is the first time they did this. Now, if you go to the Dawes final roll, the lowest blood degree on there is 65 over 5/12. Now, where they came up with that, I have no idea. If you ever look at a Dawes testimony and you look for the Dawes card, like this card you see in the lower right-hand corner, there's no math. There's no math. There's no division or multiplication. There's blood degree. In their testimony, they'd be often asked, how much Cherokee are you? And they would say, I think I'm about a 16th. I might be an 8th. I might be a quarter. There were no definite answers. There are Cherokee citizens in Cherokee Nation today that are even cousins that have 3 different blood degrees, or blood quantum because of the original ancestors answering, giving a different answer to that same question because they didn't all apply together at the same time. Families were split because they lived in different areas, and so they didn't all huddle together and say, this is what we're going to say when they come around. We're going to say we're this, so let's all say that. That didn't quite work out that way. And the federal government was using that in association with what we call land allotments and their deeds and restrictions, where they had to pay taxes, but it was not restricted. Anyway, there's a lot to that, and there's a book by Dr. Angie DeVoe called Stillwater's Run, where it's basically an expose of the Dawes Commission. And the more I read front to back, the more I read it, the better I got. There's element species in there, though, from the various chiefs of the 5 tribes. There's statistics in there that she gave of population numbers. Like in 1890, the population of the Cherokee Nation, about 39% of the population of the Cherokee Nation were Cherokee citizens. 61% of the population of the Cherokee Nation in 1890 were not considered Cherokee citizens by tribal authorities and the federal government, and so they're not listed as such on the population census. You'll see in the 1893 census for the Cherokee Nation, they'll have a section that's called persons not recognized as Cherokee citizens by blood, and that will be people that have come in. The Cherokee Nation allowed for farmers that needed help on their farm 2 work permits to hire someone from outside if they wanted to. I guess they were free to bring their families with them, and they'll be enumerated in that persons not recognized census of the 1893 portion of the 1893 census we just looked at. But this is, again, like I said, that was used as the backup for the Dawes Commission, the 1896 census. We're still rolling. This is the 1897 current Clifton roll. So these are the Cherokee Freeman families that are listed on this. This was also used by the Dawes Commission when they were establishing Cherokee Freeman on the Dawes final roll. And it was done by Mr. Kern, obviously by Mr. Kern and Mr. Clifton. They combined their names. Unless his name is hyphenated, I don't know. I can't remember if somebody can correct me. But anyway, this again is a population census basically. It tells you family groups, it tells you their ages. Some of these records are interesting is that they'll maybe listed alphabetically by last name, like all the A's and all the B's. But if you're taking a population census and you're going door to door, I seriously doubt everybody lived alphabetically. But that's the way they're good at alphabet. Again, this is the Dawes. It's a big roll, isn't it? I'm coming to the bottle roll, honey. Anybody that watched Sanford Son, you know what I'm talking about. Fred Sanford. All right. I love Sanford Son. It's a big roll, Elizabeth. This is the Dawes Final Roll. This is the one that the 5 tribes of Eastern Oklahoma use as their base rolls as per their constitution. The Dawes Commission did all 5 tribes. We have other folks that'll come in and think the Dawes Commission did all the tribes together as one. And that no, they're 5 separate tribes. They are not one tribe. That's what I call 5 tribes. That's another thing too, is that when I talk about the 5 tribes, one thing I'm not going to put that word civilized. Because to me, all tribal people were civilized in their own way, just not in the way the Europeans and those that were based in the European countries that came here as colonists thought it should be. So I refer to it as the 5 tribes. I do not use the word not saying that everybody's civilized, everybody's civilized. So I want to just focus on that, because I think it puts a light on other tribal nations that were just as civilized. They were just civilized in their own way. But this is Dawes' testimony. You see it on the screen. I know anybody here has looked at their ancestors' Dawes' testimony. One thing I like to ask when I'm in a group of Cherokee citizens is how many here in this room know who their original Dawes and Rowley is? Show of hands. Well, that's a good hand number right there. I'll go to groups, and the reason being is that maybe your mom got your card for you when you went to school. You don't know how you got the card, but your mom got it for you, or your grandma got it for you, or somebody in the family got it for you, and that's how you have a card today. But if you know who your original Rowley is, that's where it started at. And then again, the land allotments where family farms were located. But this is the process where this started. The mentioned 1898 Curtis Act is going to enforce this process, whether the Cherokee Nation like it or not. You'll often find in these testimonies where, because they could not read or write or speak English, they were considered incompetent to handle their own affairs, your ancestors, and so they would have to have a legal representative to represent them. And they were trying to sell their allotment, or there was mineral rights on it. But even though they may have understood English, they just couldn't respond to you in English. They were still considered incompetent to handle their affairs. Or if they refused to speak English, even though they may have known it, it's still the same scenario. And of course, if they were willing to talk and come forward, I've got 10 minutes. Willing to come and talk forward, if they spoke Cherokee, they'd have an interpreter. So you've got the middleman, or middle person. Usually Simon Walking Stick was a main interpreter. And so all the guys asking in English, Simon Walking Stick's repeating in Cherokee, the person answering the question in Cherokee, Simon repeats back to me in English. Something's going to get lost if anyone here knows the Cherokee language. It's Cherokee language, like telling time, for instance. You say 8:15, you're not really saying 8:15, you're saying 15 after 8, basically. And so that's kind of flipping it around and say 8:15. So there were some phrases that were a little foreign to the Cherokee when they're trying to repeat them and translate it back into English. When they're trying to learn English. This was processed primarily between 1900 and 1906. And then any children that were missed in 1900 and 1906 will be added until 1914. And like I said, the Dawes Commission did all 5 tribes. That's the Dawes census card, as we saw earlier, and then this is their Dawes testimony. It is transcribed and typewritten. There was more than one copy of this. The Dawes Commission kept a copy. The originals were, as far as I know, still in Fort Worth. I heard they were going to move to the Kansas City National Archives in Kansas City, Missouri. But then the family members, the families that were applying, they got a copy. So I guess they had carbon paper back then, right? I mean, they had to, right? They didn't have copy machines, so they had to have carbon paper. Anyway. And we're rolling down to the end, so we're getting close to the end. This is a 1902 Cherokee roll. This is a census the Dawes Commission took while they were doing the Dawes process. During the Dawes process, if a person that was applying died during that process, then their application would not be completed because they were dead. They would not receive an allotment. You had to be living to receive an allotment. The other thing that me and Kathleen were talking about me is that because you've got to look at a Cherokee adult but then you've got 8 kids. So there's going to be more kids than adults. So most Cherokee citizens today descend from somebody that was born between 1880 and 1906 as their direct link to the Dawes final roll, their closest direct link. Sometimes you'll find grandparents, parents, and children all on the Dawes roll in family groups on this Dawes roll. And this is the census that we're doing during the process. If they were born during the process, you saw earlier on the previous slide, they often have a birth, on the far right, a birth affidavit or a death affidavit, which is like a birth or death certificate. That would be included in the Dawes testimony. You can use our Ancestry.com or Fold3.com. This is, again, like a population census, but it gives you their roll number and their ages and their Christian family unit, or if they were just single, it's just single. And then the role of, what I call, the role of genealogical jewels and annuity with family history. And that 1906, 1909 got Miller, or Ian Miller, depends on who you ask, but they're also referred as Eastern Cherokee applications. They refer back to that removal treaty, the treaty removed showed $5 million. The old settlers got paid in 1896, we looked at that a minute ago. Now that the Cherokee that migrated, their descendants were getting paid the rest of that, supposedly, I don't think it was the rest of that $5 million, but supposedly the rest of the $5 million were being paid out by the Miller Commission. And Guy Miller was in charge, and that's his name, Guy Miller, Guyon, it's French. But it confuses people when you see Eastern Cherokee applications, so they think that all has to do with the Cherokee that were in the East, which would be the Cherokee in North Carolina. This is not. This is referring to the Treaty of Neoshoda and the monies in that treaty, before they removed here, and those that remained behind. So anyone that was originally on the Chapman and the Drennan, they could document back to that person, or anyone that they claim to, like brothers and sisters that didn't have kids or anything, they could claim a portion of the money was here in this application. What I like about it is it's filled with type testimonies of family history. You see on the far left, down the lower left-hand corner, a lot of times they would apply, they would piggyback. One would initially apply, one family member, and all the other family members would apply off that person. And so there's a list of all the applications associated with this one main application. It tells you the name of parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters, or if they know their dates of birth or their dates of death, they will give that in this testimony. But the thing about this is that they had to verify they or their parents or their grandparents had been paid the first time in 1851 to receive this payment. So they are a good source of genealogy information. Almost more than 2/3 of them are rejected because, again, like with the Dawes roll, outsiders found out about Malcolm Miller's Eastern Cherokee application and the monies associated with it. So outsiders from all over the place in the United States started to apply for it, but they couldn't make the criteria. So almost all of these were rejected, or the majority of them were rejected. And we oftentimes people find their ancestor on here, but they'll be rejected. When they send us as a page in their ancestry research, and they have somebody on the Miller, they always predict this. But this first card in the upper left-hand corner, see up in the upper left corner, and see on the image of the upper right of the image, it says rejected. For some reason, they tend to leave that out when they send us a page from this application. It's not the page that says rejected. And so when we get in there, we go, hey, wait a minute, it was rejected. So I send them that page, and I highlight rejected. And also the reasons why they were rejected. I highlight that too. But again, good source of genealogy information, whether they were accepted or rejected. And as were the applications that were taken in 1896, they're good for genealogy information, but they are not Cherokee citizens primarily, they are outsiders. There were just a very few Cherokee citizens that tried to apply in 1896, but a very slim number. Now we're down to the last. This is, I mentioned earlier, the 19th Churchill roll. This was the base roll that was done by the Baker Commission. They used it for the Baker roll in 1924-29. These applications are on Ancestry.com for the Baker roll. You can see it right there. 4 minutes. Anyway, this is the Baker. These are on Ancestry. They're good genealogy information like the Miller Baker roll applications. I wish the old seller 1896 pay list with the names, aunt and uncle, brother, sister, mom, dad, that would tell this kind of information in it. But I've never seen pages. David, have you ever seen pages on 1896 old seller payroll that like these dates of birth and that kind of stuff? Yeah. Me either. This is getting after Fred Churchill over here. This is after Fred Baker over the right. These are Eastern Band records. And like I said, in the census, the Churchill was a census just like the Hester. These two were used by the Baker. Now, and so these are the sources that I use for this presentation. We primarily use the web. Charlie Hofire and I, Charlie Hofire is the genealogist at the Research Center. We do get out a book every once in a while. We'll get Bob Blankenship's index and he cross-reference Miller with Dawes applicants. And sometimes he's even off on his records. Like I said, no complete concise correct records of a lot of things. And a lot of it's in book form, as you see here. For those that want to look at a book and they don't want to get on the web and use the web. I use a family story of a guy named George Pumpkin. George Pumpkin was a Cherokee elder. He was a fluent Cherokee speaker. He was a medicine person. He was married to Aggie Christie. They had children. They had Ernie and Maxine, Max. And when Aggie passed away, and he was living down at Briggs, down in the valley, and he was there at the house by himself. You know, he would do crafts and things, but then he didn't want to watch TV. And so Ernie and Max and David and Tom, they pulled their resources and they bought George Pumpkin a desktop PC. And he went to town. He was emailing Sonny, which is Max's daughter. And so he was emailing the grandkids. You know, that computer didn't scare him any. And he was a Cherokee elder and a speaker and a medicine person. So yeah, you shouldn't be afraid of the web. They have blocks. They have other things you can on there. I've been on the computer since the computer was around. And I don't want to jinx myself for big wood and knock on. I've never been hacked. Thank you. So, you know, the things, the fears that people have associated with using the web are, you know, can be, you know, not unfounded, but they can be heard. Find a Grave, which is a cemetery website. It's a volunteer site. You can find graves there and photos of graves. You can also be a member of Find a Grave. It's a volunteer site. You can add photos to a grave listing, like your ancestor, and there's a listing, a photo of his headstone or her headstone. You can add an obituary, a death certificate. Charlotte, that's where she's the area of expertise. It's Find a Grave. She's got in there and done those types of things. I have myself, not as much as Charlotte has. David, you on Find a Grave? Are you on Find a Grave? Yes. All right. That is the end of my presentation.